The sun had barely risen over Ironcrest City when rumors began spreading like wildfire. Rumors about a bet so outrageous, so reckless, and so humiliating that nobody believed it at first. In the highest tower of Outrun Financial Group, billionaire CEO Victor Outrun stood with his hands in his pockets, staring down at the parking lot where an old, beaten-down 1998 charcoal grey sedan sat alone like a forgotten relic. The car's faded paint looked like it had endured 100 battles. The rims were mismatched, and the right headlight was clinging to the body by a thin strip of hope. It looked like a car people drove only when life had kicked them hard, yet today it was at the center of a storm. Victor Outrun was no ordinary businessman. He was a ruthless, sharp-tongued corporate beast, known for humiliating competitors and employees alike. His empire was built on risk, intimidation, and a hunger to dominate. A man like him didn't just win, he crushed. And today he was ready to crush someone he saw as beneath him. That someone was Darius Cole, the company's newest driver, a quiet, disciplined man who barely spoke about his past. Darius showed up every day in that same old junk sedan, the one everyone laughed at. The security guards joked it looked like a car held together by prayers. Junior employees snickered when it rattled into the lot. Even executives whispered that a man who drove a car like that didn't belong near the company's elite circles. What they didn't know, what nobody knew, was that Darius Cole had once stood on the world stage, that he had once held a championship trophy that millions dreamed of, that before the world turned its back on him, he had been one of the fastest men alive. But Darius never corrected anyone. He never bragged. He never reminded the world who he was. He simply nodded, smiled, and went about his job with a professionalism that confused people who expected him to fight back. Victor Outrun hated that silence. To him, silence was weakness. So when he discovered that Darius had been hired as his personal driver for the week, Victor's ego flared like gasoline on fire. He examined the old car and burst out laughing in front of his senior team. "Can you believe this? My driver comes to work in that metallic trash can." The executives laughed, desperate to stay on his good side. One even said, "Sir, that thing wouldn't outrun a bicycle." And that was when Victor decided to make the moment public. On the top floor balcony, he shouted for the whole staff to hear, "Darius, bring your rust bucket up front. I've got a challenge for you." When Darius stepped forward, tall, calm, composed, everyone fell silent. They expected him to crack or get angry. Instead, his expression remained unreadable, like a man who had seen storms far bigger than office laughter. Victor strutted across the balcony with a theatrical flourish. "I'll make you a deal," he announced loudly, voice echoing off the glass walls of the tower. "If you can outrun me in that junk car of yours, I will sign over a 10% stake of Outrun Financial Group on the spot." Gasps erupted across the building. 10% of Outrun Financial was worth hundreds of millions. "But," Victor continued with a smirk, "when you lose, and trust me, you will hand over that old car of yours, and you will resign immediately. Deal?" The entire plaza below fell silent. All eyes turned to Darius. For most people, this would have been career suicide. Victor wasn't challenging him to a friendly race. He was staging a public humiliation, a spectacle, a way to remind everyone who the king was. Cameras were already recording. Employees whispered. Reporters began rushing toward the company gate. But Darius didn't flinch. He didn't tremble. He didn't even blink. He simply asked, "What are the race conditions?" Victor grinned. "Simple. 3 laps around Ridgewater Canyon Road. My car versus yours. My billion-dollar reputation versus your scrap metal." His senior engineers rolled out Victor's pride and joy, a custom-built Atheon XZR supercar, midnight blue, V12 engine, titanium chassis, top speed beyond anything legal. The crowd cheered as its engine roared like a mythic beast awakening. Darius's sedan wheezed beside it like an asthmatic whisper. "So," Victor teased, "do you accept?" Darius looked at his old car, the one he had kept all these years, not because he couldn't afford better, but because it was the last memory of someone he lost. Then he looked at Victor and the crowd. His voice was low, steady, and firm. "I accept." The crowd erupted in disbelief. People muttered that Darius had lost his mind. Some pitied him. Others called him foolish. Only one person didn't react, Darius himself. Victor extended his hand with a mocking grin. "Great. Get ready to lose everything." As they shook hands, Victor leaned in so only Darius could hear. "I don't know how you got hired here, but after today, you're gone." Darius simply replied, "We'll see." Behind the scenes, something unexpected was happening. A young tech intern named Layla was reviewing employee files when she stumbled across something unbelievable. Darius Cole wasn't just any driver. He was a former Formula One world champion, one of the youngest in history, a man who dominated the circuit for 3 years straight, a man who vanished after a tragic accident involving his younger brother Malik, who died during a charity race. Darius left the sport the next day and disappeared from public life completely. Seeing his file, Layla ran down 42 flights of stairs, breathless, desperate to warn someone, but nobody listened. Everyone was too busy laughing, recording, betting money on Victor's victory. Meanwhile, Darius was in the parking lot, hand resting on the hood of his old sedan. He whispered, "Let's show them." That car wasn't just metal. It was the car Malik used to repair with him when they were kids. Every scratch had a story. Every dent was a memory. The car wasn't fast by technology, but Darius wasn't relying on the car. He was relying on something no machine could match: skill, precision, discipline, and heart. Reporters now surrounded Victor as he boasted. "I admire confidence," he said loudly. "But confidence without ability is comedy." Cameras turned to Darius, hoping for a reaction, but he simply checked his tire pressure, adjusted his seat, and tightened the steering column with a small wrench he kept in the glove compartment. The time for talk was over. Now came action. As both cars lined up at the starting point of Ridgewater Canyon Road, the air buzzed with tension. The canyon was infamous. Sharp turns, steep drops, narrow paths. One mistake meant disaster. Victor revved his supercar like a dragon setting fire to the air. Darius's sedan coughed once, twice, then settled into a stubborn rumble. Victor leaned out the window and called, "Try not to die out there." Darius didn't answer. He was already in a zone Victor had never known. The race marshal raised the flag. The crowd leaned in. Cameras flashed. Drones hovered overhead. And in those final few seconds before the flag dropped, something astonishing happened. Darius closed his eyes, exhaled softly, and murmured, "For Malik." Whoom! The flag swung down. Victor exploded forward like a rocket, tires screaming, engine roaring. Darius's sedan lurched, stuttered, and then surged forward with unexpected strength. By the end of the first straight, Victor was already laughing. Too easy, he muttered as he drifted through the first sharp turn. But what he didn't see, what nobody saw yet, was the way Darius's hands moved on the steering wheel. Calm, controlled, surgical. While Victor tore through the road with aggression, Darius flowed through it with mastery, balancing his weight, conserving momentum, using every inch of the canyon to his advantage. He didn't fight the car. He guided it. He didn't force speed. He created it. As the road tightened, Victor pushed his $1 million engine harder, expecting the old car to fall behind. Instead, when he glanced in the rearview mirror, his smile faded. Darius was still there, not struggling, not panicking, just following, smoothly, predictably, like a predator waiting for the right moment. Victor growled and floored the engine. Flames spat from the exhaust. The canyon walls blurred. But Darius remained behind him, inch for inch, like a shadow he couldn't escape. Spectators watching from drones gasped, "Who is this guy? How is he keeping up in that?" Victor's confidence began to crack. No, this isn't possible. And then came the infamous dead man's curve, where even professionals slowed down. Victor approached it recklessly, braking too late, skidding dangerously close to the cliff edge. But Darius? He glided through the turn with the elegance of a dancer, tires kissing the edge, body leaning just right, every movement precise. For the first time in years, Victor felt fear. For the first time since losing his brother, Darius felt alive. In that moment, the world finally saw the truth. The junk car didn't matter. The odds didn't matter. The humiliation didn't matter. What mattered was who was behind the wheel. And Darius Cole, quiet, humble, underestimated Darius, wasn't just a driver. He was a legend reborn, and the race had only just begun.
The storm of engines shook the city as Victor Outrun and Darius Cole shot off the canyon road and onto the Ironcrest Bridge, their tires screaming against the asphalt, their cars trembling under the pressure of raw speed and desperation. The entire city had frozen in place. Traffic stopped. Pedestrians stood on sidewalks, office workers pressed against windows, all witnessing a race that had started as a humiliation but had now transformed into a moment of destiny. Darius's old sedan rattled violently, its engine sounding like a wounded beast refusing to die, smoke whispering out from beneath the hood. Yet his hands remained steady, eyes locked onto the road as if he were staring at a path he had been destined to drive his whole life. Victor, on the other hand, was falling apart. His face was drenched in sweat, his jaw clenched so tightly it looked like it might shatter, and his eyes darted wildly between the road and Darius's relentless figure beside him. "This is my city," he screamed into the wind, slamming the accelerator to the floor. The V12 supercar roared like a demon, flames bursting from its exhaust as it surged ahead, forcing Darius to fall back by a car length. For a moment, the crowd gasped. Victor's machine looked unstoppable, a metallic monster tearing down the bridge at terrifying speed. But then something happened that Victor hadn't expected. Darius leaned forward, exhaled softly, and whispered, "Stay with me, one more time." The sedan trembled as if responding to his voice, its engine groaning, coughing, then tightening into a fierce, determined growl. Darius downshifted with the precision of a surgeon, and the old car shot forward with a punch of raw force that stunned everyone watching. The distance between them evaporated. They were side by side again, the bridge shaking beneath the pressure of their duel. Drones captured it every moment, the glint in Darius's eyes returning light, a phoenix rising from ashes, and the panic in Victor's eyes growing light, cracks in a collapsing empire. But as they reached the midpoint of the bridge, disaster struck. A gust of wind slammed across the structure, spiraling dust into the air. Victor's supercar, already pushed beyond its limits, twitched. Its rear tire clipped a loose bolt on the guardrail, just a tiny nudge, but at this speed tiny nudges become deadly. The hypercar fishtailed wildly. Victor lost control. No, he screamed as the car spun violently across the lane, slamming into a pillar with an explosion of sparks. The world dropped into silence. The supercar bounced off the pillar, flipped once, twice, metal twisting like tin foil, then crashed onto its roof in a mangled heap. Gasps, screams, and shouts echoed across the city as people watched the billionaire's pride crumble in flames. Drones froze midair. Reporters dropped their microphones. Layla, watching from the Outrun tower, clapped her hands to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. But through the chaos, one man did not freeze. Darius slammed the brakes, his car skidding sideways in a cloud of smoke, coming to a stop just inches from the wreckage. Without hesitation, without fear, he jumped out and ran toward the burning vehicle. Fire crackled violently. The heat was unbearable. Victor was upside down, blood dripping, eyes wide in shock, his leg pinned by twisted metal. "Help! Somebody help me!" Victor cried weakly. But the crowd could only watch from a distance. The flames roared higher. Glass shattered. The fuel tank hissed a warning that the explosion was seconds away, and then a pair of hands appeared. Darius, his silhouette cut through the smoke like a guardian rising from the ashes. "You're going to be okay," he said, voice steady, even as flames burned dangerously close to his arms. Victor stared at him in disbelief. Why are you helping me? After everything I did to you, why?" Darius didn't answer. He simply grabbed the frame, pulled with all his strength, metal shrieking under his grip. He forced an opening. Victor screamed in pain, but Darius didn't stop. The fire crept closer. Heat scorched his skin. Sweat dripped into his eyes. And then cracked the metal bent enough for Darius to drag Victor out of the wreck. Just as they reached the edge of the bridge railing boom, the supercar exploded. In a ball of fire, shards of metal flying into the air like deadly sparks. The shock wave knocked both men onto the ground. Darius shielded Victor with his own body, taking the brunt of the blast. When the smoke cleared, the drones captured a sight that shook the entire world, the billionaire lying injured, and the man he mocked kneeling beside him, burned, bruised, but alive and still protecting him. Emergency crews rushed in. Paramedics grabbed Victor, placing him on a stretcher. But instead of thanking Darius, Victor stared at him with a trembling voice. You could have let me.